Imagine dedicating yourself to a sport where success can hinge on a single touch and where every win or loss is an opportunity to learn. Ari Simmons is one of the top U.S. Epee fencers. He's a coach, he's a natural storyteller, he's an influencer in this community, and he has his eyes set on the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics. Ari first made his mark by winning a Cadet World Championship, and then he went on to become a four-time All-American at Notre Dame, helping the Fighting Irish clinch some NCAA team titles while he was there. He's also represented Team USA on the international stage at many different levels and continues to compete on the senior circuit. Now he's training for LA 2028, where he's balancing the grind of an Olympic life with life outside the strip. He's also shaped the next generation. He's been a coach at Duke and the Air Force Academy, and he's a co-host of his own podcast, the Direct Elimination Podcast, which is a great listen. He's talking to fellow athletes about grit and failure and purpose, and it's a great opportunity to grow and understand this sport even more. So for Ari and for a lot of us, fencing might be this niche sport, but we've seen that its lessons about resilience and strategy and finding joy in fencing are universal. So Ari, this is a great time to talk to you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Brian. Never met with you virtually. I've gotten to hang out with you in person quite a few times. So excited to be a guest on your podcast and answering any questions you might have.
I've got a lot. So, we like to start with kind of the origin story. And I think for you, it's an interesting one because you found success on the senior circuit. I guess at this point, it's more than 10 years ago, right? And you were a cadet world champion. But what got you into fencing and has kept you around for so long?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. So I love to talk about my origin story. This guy is probably sick of hearing his name. But Anton Piskovatskov, another great fencer from Alliance Fencing Academy, is one of my lifelong best friends. We've been friends since we were about 4 years old. And at the age of 8, when we were 8, his mom married a guy who happened to become, and already was or become, that's up in there, but it's Andre Geva, who is one of the best epee coaches in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, he owned a fencing club. Anton got forced into fencing. And 2 years later, after hanging out, going and seeing some competitions locally, my mom said, you should try that out. So we convinced one of our other really close friends to try, and my sister got forced to start with me. And it was off to the races. We did a summer camp in 2007. And since then, I haven't thought much about other sports. I do love basketball, but fencing really became what dominated my mental space. I loved the ways in which the sport challenged me. I loved the ways that it enabled you to compete with other people as an individual, but you train with them as a team. And although you're out there on your own when you're competing for the most part outside of team events, when you're at the club training, it's a family environment. You feel like you're a part of a team, a larger organization, and it really touched on a lot of the things that are important in both individual competition and in team work. So I definitely loved that from an early days fencing. I loved the game, and I loved the ability to go there and play with my friends and spend time as a young kid. And sorry though, I definitely didn't have a high level of skill or performance at a young age. So I can't say that winning is what kept me in there. I got dead last in my first tournament, maybe my first couple tournaments. I was performing lower on the rankings relative to some of the other fencers at the club. Anton in particular was always a top performer for our age group through post college, right? So he was great. And at a certain point, something clicked in me to take the sport a bit more seriously, whether it was being told that, I'm too much of a goofball, I talk too much, I'm not taking it seriously, or just seeing my teammates find a lot of success in this sport that, I was going to the same competitions and performing really poorly. And seeing them take it more seriously and coming to practice and constantly losing when I had the resources to improve. Could have
Yeah.
been that, could have been getting a new coach in Sergey Danilov when he came to Alliance in 2010 after about 3 years of me fencing. But none of that is what keeps me in it today. I stick around in fencing because the game still gives me a lot of life and invigorates me. I found that over the course of many years, my commitment to pushing myself in the sport of fencing and all the things that have come out of that have really pushed me to become the best version of myself off the strip and just
Hmm.
as a person. It's helped me find balance, and it's been a tool and a mirror for myself to look into and understand who I really am in that moment and what I apply to improve myself in fencing, whether it's discipline or being brutally honest with myself or facing loss and having to grow, or being humble through wins or being passionate about something, whatever it is, patient. Those traits that you can sharpen via a sport or a tool or a passion like fencing help you become a better version of yourself off the strip. So I really love that. And then you mentioned this in your intro, interacting with the next generation is something that I've made a very important goal for myself. I
Hmm.
found that when I was growing up, YouTube was just starting to become a thing, and we had awesome resources like Cyrus of Chaos posting a lot of videos on the internet for us to watch fencing.
Right.
That being said, there weren't a lot of opportunities for fencers at the younger level and even at the higher level to be able to interface and network with and get into the minds of top athletes
Mm.
across multiple generations. And their idols were untouchable. The people that I would watch at NACS, Seth Kelsey and Soren Thompson and all these guys, Cody Matter, and they're a long list, and the international guys, there was no face-to-face interaction that I was having with them as a lower level fencer. And I was simply inspired by them from what I saw. I never got to hear about the way they think. I never got to have any lessons or mentorship from those high up guys. And I think that one of the pieces that has really hurt men's epee in the US over the last decade and a half has been a lack of proper mentorship, probably for the younger athletes. We've had a lot of really talented athletes, as you see at the
Hmm.
cadet junior level, winning so many medals. And we just had a fairly disconnected older contingent of fencers. Not that it's a bad thing or a good thing. They just weren't focused on mentoring the younger guys in a constructive and productive way. And we'd see a steep drop off after college and this every man for himself mentality. And it didn't sit right with me. And I really felt that I could have benefited more from somebody who had been in my shoes prior to me, helping me and my peers guide ourselves or help guide us through the treacherous waters of becoming an adult, right? And I think that I've loved doing that and paying it forward. And obviously, there are plenty of ways in which I could and could have done it better and could continue to do it better. But hopefully, my efforts inspire the next group of guys to continue doing that even more so and iterating on it. Because not only do we have a strong network of talented athletes, we have a strong network of athletes who could truly be the best in the world.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And something you said is really interesting there, which is, our cadet men's epee and our junior men's epee teams are so strong, but it has been a while since like men's epee has won an Olympic medal, right? When we think about the drop off there, um, coupled with the fact that epee just naturally seems to be, and you would know better than me, seems to be a sport where the world champions are, people in their 30s instead of in their 20s, like in maybe foil and saber. How do we bridge that gap in Team USA fencing from the cadet and junior success that we're having with men's epee to the senior level? And I'd love to hear from you, especially because you're part of that senior level team, right? So you're not just talking at it from an outsider, you're someone who's there with the 12 guys traveling around the world to compete.
Yeah, great question. So I think that everything is always changing, right? So people like Sam Emmerich and others, even your Tristan Saparis, these very, very talented, motivated, and in many ways mature for their age athletes starting to become a lot stronger at a younger age, become more professional about the way they conduct themselves, and finding the solution. You have Italian guy named Matteo Galassi, same age as Sam, Mahmoud El Sayed and Mohammed El Sayed, both performing at an incredibly high level into their early 20s. And overall, men's epee seems to be trending downwards as it just becomes more athletic and crazy, which is fun. There is still the trend where people who stick around longer and just get that experience tend to have it click later on. And that's good for people like myself who still want the great things for themselves in their late 20s and early 30s. So
Sure.
to answer your question, I believe we're already doing that. It's a pretty simple solution. I think that as a team, the most important thing is working together. And I think that it's not that we never worked together, right? It's just a matter of it being a more collective goal for the group and an easy factor to point to, two factors to point to for why this might be happening now. Because you are seeing a growth. You're seeing a lot more individual results come out, and you're seeing the team finally start to break through the drought of wins that we've had.
Sure.
So that comes from two reasons. So one, you have to give credit to the athletes who are all buying in, most likely due to Los Angeles 2028 being right around the corner in the US. We know the implications of that with the team slot, that if the team doesn't qualify and we've shown enough potential that we could potentially get one of these at-large or wild card bids.
As the hosts, right?
As a host, excuse me. Yeah, as the host country. That's
Yep.
why it's motivating for people. And we're seeing a lot of buy-in from the athletes. A lot of athletes are sticking around. A lot of athletes are competing, trying to become stronger versions of themselves. That helps. And we're also starting to work together, especially in the New York area, but all around. You're seeing more collaborative efforts to improve, people not keeping secrets as much because they realize that a rising tide's raising all ships. And the second one being, honestly, our national coach, Seth Kelsey, is a former great men's epeist. He is the best U.S. men's epeist in history if we look at, on paper. And that is an
I think he got a 4th place Olympic finish, right? Which is the highest we've seen in maybe ever or a long time.
Yeah, to my knowledge, we don't have a men's epee Olympic medal from the U.S., but that was a great Olympic finish. On top of that, Seth was one of the top 16 fencers in the world for a majority, if not all, of his senior career. So Seth's mentorship and just him being around and being invested and showing that he knows fencing, he's showcased. He's even suited up on occasion and beat some of our top guys just
Nice.
for fun. Not because he was like, oh, you guys need to get beat down, but really it was like a Monday, and most of the fencers during this camp were at work, and some of the guys who didn't have jobs, let's say it's 4 people or 5 people, were there in the morning for a training camp, and Seth said, I'll fence you guys. And he showed them the work. So he's definitely still got it, and that's inspiring just to see someone of that level of expertise on the strip and that level of team experience. He's also a team world champion, silver medalist, which is something that even many of our greats right now across the other weapons can't claim. So I think that having his mentorship has been really disarming for a lot of the fencers that typically have their guard up, because he's very calm and his presence is very warm, all things considered. He wants to be there. He wants us to succeed, and he wants, in an unbiased way, just wants to see everyone kind of bring out the best of themselves. So I believe that those are two pieces of this answer to your question of how can we keep up. I mean, really, it's teamwork, and it's everyone taking themselves a little bit more professionally in their preparation. We hadn't had everything was really siloed, and people, I don't think, were as professional as they could be. We saw Curtis McDowell and Jake Hoyle reach a really high level right before the Tokyo Olympics, and I believe that they were taking it pretty professionally at the time. But that fell off. Jake stopped fencing, and we just hadn't seen a high level of professionalism from men's epee. We saw a large gap. We saw a lot of younger fencers coming in, not knowing how to manage that, and through the years of getting experience, mentorship from the older guys, and everyone collectively buying into taking it more seriously,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen that uptick, and we're only going to see more. My prediction is that it's going to continue to improve on the individual front as well as the team, and that's probably the most we can do here in the U.S. at the moment with the system that we have at our disposal.
Yeah, and obviously I know USA Fencing is always trying to do more, support more athletes as much as our budget allows. I want to talk about your your climbing the level. You talked about how at your first tournament, you finished dead last and obviously turned things around. But I'm most curious about your recruiting from Notre Dame, because a lot of people who listen to this are interested in that journey, how someone gets on the radar of a top program like that. So if you can take us back to, when you were making that decision and how you stood out to catch the eye of Notre Dame and end up at this program that, is a legendary within the world of collegiate fencing.
Yeah, so I actually had a very interesting roundabout way of getting to Notre Dame, and I'm happy to share it. It's not the recommended path for most because I did some stuff that I don't recommend doing.
Got it.
So I don't think that I necessarily shared in the struggle that a lot of kids face with trying to get their fencing and the results viewed by college coaches. The reason
Mm-hmm.
being, recruiting used to start your senior year. It's now expanded to the summer before your junior year. It used to be
Right.
1 year later. So you didn't really start talking to coaches or anything like that until months before you apply or less, and then you apply and then you're done. On top of that, my parents never really pushed fencing as a way to get into college. I see that as a huge red flag for many kids starting fencing right now. I feel comfortable coming out here and saying that. I think that many kids nowadays are being pushed to fence and being really pushed to their limits by their parents rather than their desire to improve in the sport and their coaches. And I think that for me, my parents allowing me, they said, we're not going to spend money on fencing if you get kicked out of classes and if we know you're not trying. But if you're putting in
Mm-hmm.
your best effort and your coaches say that you're ready to compete at these competitions and all this stuff, they put a lot of trust in their coaches. And the coaches at Alliance said, Ari's ready to go to this tournament. My parents said, if you think it's worth it, then we'll make it possible for him to go. And they let me fall in love with the sport and deal with loss and push myself. And that ultimately led to some really cool stuff. I was very lucky to have great coaches, great training partners, and ultimately lucky to perform well when I performed well. Winning Cadet World Championship my sophomore year of high school put me on the radar for all the college coaches.
Sure.
And at that point, it became a lot more about what are your grades? What are your test scores? At that time, we didn't have test optional. We also didn't have as many serious college coaches. I'll go ahead and say that. The landscape nowadays, as the athlete pool has become a lot more saturated with high level fencers, the college pool has also become a lot more saturated with college coaches that take their program seriously. And that has come from a variety of factors. Fencing is growing, athletic departments are taking it more seriously. It just was a different game back then. And going into my my senior year, I committed to going to University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Business,
Mm-hmm.
and I just really wanted to go to a college. And they, along with some other schools, said, "Hey, we want you. You have the test scores, you have the fencing. We'd love to have you." And I said yes. I visited a few of them. Didn't really go during the school year. I think I spent a day during summer at 3 different campuses and just kind of made a decision based off
Mm-hmm.
of whatever 17-year-old version of myself was capable bringing to the table, which was not very much, I'm going to be honest. Not a lot of self awareness, not a lot of understanding of what my needs would be or were,
Sure.
and not a lot of understanding of what I wanted for myself years from now because I was a child. And then it got accepted to the University of Pennsylvania. And that same year, I made a senior team, my senior year of high school. And after many conversations with my teammates and my coaches and parents, I decided to take a gap year. During that gap year, I visited the University of Notre Dame to visit a girlfriend at the time, actually. And although that relationship ended, my visit to the school was really impactful. I saw the way that the team trained, and I saw the way in which the school worked. I saw the way that essentially the ethos of the place that I was in. I saw the way that the athletes were handled. After class, I went to study hall. There was a lot of work. You're in the middle of nowhere at Notre Dame. You don't have a big city life. You can't go and get in trouble most days of the week. There's just not a lot of opportunity for that. And at the time, I was a rambunctious young teenager. So that was, I started to have a little bit of self awareness. This was a year after I had applied to college. Maybe I
Mm-hmm.
was getting older. Maybe it was just because I was at Notre Dame and saw the team train very professionally. And it was a standout moment for me because I realized that this was the real deal. I should probably go check out how the other teams are training. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania for a week as well. Had a wonderful time. I have a lot of friends on that team at the time, and I had a blast. That being said, the way that the athletes were managed, there was a lot more autonomy for the athletes, and the coursework seemed to be pretty cutthroat at Wharton School of Business. And the team didn't have the same level of professionalism that Notre Dame did. And that was for a myriad of factors, probably mostly being funding and scholarships. Notre Dame is really, it's a strong academic institution that prides itself greatly on its athletic pursuits, and it allows
Mm-hmm.
those athletic pursuits to then fund further things from the academic side. The Ivy Leagues are completely different. They were a lot more on this is an Ivy League institution. You're lucky to be here, and you can play sports. And the team had some great epaists on it. It just didn't seem to have the support that I felt that I needed in
Mm-hmm.
order to not fail out, if I'm being very honest with
Yeah,
you.
that's fair.
And I made a decision. I was talking to Notre Dame. I talked to Coach Ma, and I had to have a very upfront conversation with Coach Ma, which was really challenging. Again, I don't recommend this to anyone. It's very foolish that I didn't have the foresight to do this beforehand, but I had to tell him that this wasn't the school for me and that I didn't think I would thrive there. And ultimately, had to have a conversation with him saying that I was going to be applying to another school. And then I went through, tried to get recruited by Notre Dame. They were able to shift some stuff around and make space for me. And I was very lucky to be there. And
Yeah.
that's really how it went down. As far as the attention of coaches, it was just via my overall personality, I'd say sportsmanship and ability to focus in competition combined with strong test results. I did not have the strongest grades. I didn't have bad grades, but I definitely had stronger test results and fencing results and grades. And you kind
Mm-hmm.
of need a combination of all three after having worked in college,
Sure.
especially in this landscape. If you don't have the strongest fencing results, I think it's safe to understand you're not going to be a priority on the recruiting, scene. It's just how it works. There are many good fencers nowadays, and it's already hard enough for coaches to choose amongst the top fencers. But what you can do is you can really improve your test scores and grades and extracurriculars if fencing is not your strong suit, and then hope for a walk-on spot or work with coaches at schools that are slightly less competitive to find a spot on their team. If you're a top level fencer, you got to either have stellar test results or good grades if you want to have a shot at the best schools. And it's the reality of it is the better of a fencer you are in competition, the more flexibility that affords you in your
Sure.
making decision.
Yeah, that makes
All
sense.
that to say, the more burnt out that a kid gets before they get to college, the more likely they are to quit. So now another layer to this that has been introduced in the last 5 to 6 years. College coaches now also have to evaluate how seriously committed you are to the sport, which is,
Are they going to get 4 years out of you, in other words,
yeah,
right?
can they get 4 years of commitment to their team because all these teams are becoming more competitive? So what I'll say is the college coaches are getting better at sifting through that. So
Interesting.
naturally, right?
Yeah,
When
yeah.
there's competition, when there's adaptations to be made, college coaches are trying to understand who they can actually have on their team for 4 years and who's just fencing to get into college and then quit.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I'll say, my piece of advice to young fencers listening to this and to parents is really understand why you're doing this. And the the scene is getting a lot more cutthroat and competitive just to get on the college scene and to be a fencer in college. And coaches, because of that, want someone for 3 to 4 years, ideally 4 years, with a committed attitude. So that comes from not hating the sport by the time you get
Yeah,
there. So
right.
that's comes from both fencers and parents.
Well, this raises up an interesting question because like you have a lot of fencing in your life. You're competing, you're coaching, you're talking about it on podcasts, you're doing some of the best fencing content on Instagram. So if you don't follow Ari, be sure to do that right now. Pause the episode and do it. But how do you avoid getting burned out? Because you've been in this sport since you were 8, like you said, and I imagine, well, maybe not, but are there days where you're like, I just do not want to pick up an epee today, or is it still? Do you have a tactic to keep this sport fresh for you?
I think that that's a great question because it's impossible to not get burned out in
Yeah,
a sport like fencing, but in any aspect of your life. You know, it, even you, Brian, you don't show up to work every day excited to be at work every single day to be doing it.
sure.
Sometimes there are things that you need to do because you set out to do them. That being said, in order to fight burnout, the most important tool that I use is intentionality. The better you can understand yourself, your why or your purpose, and what your goals are in whatever it is that you're doing, the less likely it is that you're going to get burnt out. And the second tool that falls right under that is making sure that many of those goals are process oriented goals. So many people might really love something, truly, they're so passionate about it. And they begin to channel that passion towards only outcomes. It's win or everything's destroyed. And
Mm-hmm.
that type of resulting, just focusing on only results, also leads to burnout. And it's a really complex situation because results are motivating, whether they're good or they're bad. It's a motivating factor.
Sure.
And ultimately you need results to accomplish certain goals, and it's a really nuanced balance. But having goals that are process oriented, that are focused on your betterment or improvement as a person or an athlete or an individual or a listener or whatever it is. For example, I need to work on being a listener. I'm a yapper, but
Which is good for a podcast, I will
which
say.
is great for a podcast host. It's better for a podcast guest, is what I'll say.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but really being intentional with my time. I think that all of these aspects of fencing for me are compartmentalized into categories. So although fencing is the umbrella that chains it all together, it's not all fencing to me. There's these conversations that we have, right now for me, they don't register as fencing. This is registered as
Mm,
some derivative of sports psychology where I get to share my story, but also talk about mentality with people, right? And that's related to fencing, but it's not all fencing because this type of stuff really helps you outside of the sport. Then there is the content. That's just brand building. That's fun. You're editing videos. You're creating with people. That's more art, even though fencing is the subject matter.
yeah.
Then there is the actual fencing itself. Part of that is the game, the fencing, all that stuff. But then for me, it's also sport. It's exercise. I like
Yeah.
burning calories. I love pushing myself, and then that's the more all encompassing. It's everything. But then there's traveling to competitions, which is totally separate. I don't think of that as just fencing. That is a whole separate muscle that you're working on. Then there is, I think that's probably it for the coaching aspect is a lot more about people and working with people and growing yourself. So I think being intentional and understanding like what your goal is with each one of these tasks is really
Hmm.
important. And you don't have to have a million tasks to get the fulfillment. I think even if you're just fencing, and doing school or working or whatever, I think understanding the intention of what it is you're doing, even for a practice, right? Am I here to just play? Am I here to practice winning? Am I here to work on the things that I just did in my lesson? Am
Right.
I here to practice moments of grit or intensity? And there's so many different layers to it. Am I here to practice my parry four? Whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that allows you to keep practice fresh because you can practice one thing for a week or a day or half a practice or 3 weeks, and then you cycle through it, kind of like when you're lifting weights or when you're doing projects at work. There are multiple projects, even though it's all work, right? Now, for your job, you're meeting with me for this podcast. Maybe
Hmm.
later today, you have another podcast episode or something else. And then you have stuff dealing with the social media side of US fencing where you're trying to do strategy planning. And then you're talking about, writing an article and all this stuff. And they're different projects and the intention is similar but different. And the more you can split it all up and direct your attention to a very specific piece at any given moment, the less you're going to get burnt out with all that. The last answer that I have is taking time off. It's really hard to do, and it's really important for your mind. Just having things in your life and in your brain that consume energy that aren't just this fencing thing. I have a
Hmm.
very very supportive and committed girlfriend that I love spending time with, and a friend group. And I recently picked up fishing. And, when I was living in Colorado, I really loved hiking. And, I love going to concerts or playing music and doing things that really keep you away from fencing and that you can do for even a week or two per year or even
Hmm.
longer depending on who you are where you're totally not engaged in fencing. And I think that time off allows you to gain the hunger, redevelop that I want to be here because it's so easy to be at the end of a season and just think, oh my gosh, I played so many tournaments, my mind is jello, what's going on. And that time away is important, especially if it's intentional. If you're saying, I'm taking this time, these 2 weeks or these 3 days here, and you just step away, it allows you to come right back in, kind of like
Yeah.
a weekend at work.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's really smart. And some of that advice is I imagine similar to what you're sharing with young fencers through the KM Fencing Mentorship Program. You're one of the mentors for that. And I'd love to know why what you get out of that because it's obvious why someone would sign up to sit down with you or Mario Zagunis or Lee or Garrick for a conversation through that. But do you get something out of it as well? Talking with these young fencers and also are there trends or themes that you're hearing from today's fencers? Maybe things that they're having to deal with that you as a teenage fencer, as a younger fencer, didn't necessarily have to worry about.
Yes, of course. So first, I'll talk about the trends. Actually,
Yeah, please.
I found that, and I've already spoken to it. I found a lot more burnout in young
Okay.
athletes today.
Yeah.
Expectations seem to be higher when I was younger. We hadn't seen all the great things that U.S. fencers can do at such a young age and all this stuff. If we're winning a couple medals at World Championships for cadet and juniors, that's a huge win. Now, U.S. is dominating the cadet and junior World Championships. The bar is just
Like a
very
medal every day, right?
yeah,
9-day
no, literally,
tournament and
you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're like,
yeah.
oh, for our eighth gold medal of cadet worlds, we have, right?
Yeah.
But back then, it's like, oh my God, we have one world champion. That is sick. The U.S. just got a gold medal. That is amazing. And it's still amazing. It's not
Oh
detracting
yeah.
from any of the hard work. It's just showing how high the bar has been set.
Yep.
And that's across the board. I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. Parents are putting a lot of money into fencing, and thank you for supporting the young athletes. I think that we all know how expensive this sport is, and we all know how intense it is. That being said, they're burning the hell out of their fencers. There's so much pressure on 11-year-olds and 13-year-olds that I could have never imagined having on myself. When I was 13,
Mm.
I was a child. I I don't think I could put it better than that. I was a child. I had a childhood. I had I just that a lot of playing and playfulness is gone from this, and that's a trend that is really hard to. I'm not saying that people all out don't love the sport. There's plenty of love for the sport, but it's so challenging to balance that with the high level of expectations on results and output from parents, from coaches, from future looking ambition and aspirations. And
Mhm.
kids just forget that they need to be kids and just grow naturally and get experience doing this. And it's not all about fencing Div 1s when you're 13 years old. It's about fencing Y14 and just having fun, going to local events. And you can become the best. So many top athletes peak so much later. And there's so much
Yeah.
pressure on these athletes because they're really amazing fencers at the age of 13 now that they really weren't when I was there at that age. And
Hmm.
those fencers don't they stop progressing at a much earlier age because they've just burned the candle so hard by the time they're 15 or 16. There's so many
Hmm.
national, regional, whatever level events for younger athletes it's it's so intense. It's so
Yeah.
intense. That's a huge trend that I've seen, and it's something that's really interesting because having to help them manage that is a challenge. Because at the end of the day, when you're working for KM Fencing, people are paying you for advice to make those kids better, and sometimes it's so crazy when the advice is like, you got to play.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe slow down a little bit, right?
yeah,
It's hard to say that to someone who's saying, we're going to put the pedal to the metal all the way to the Olympics, right? It's everybody's dream.
absolutely, and it's so that's one of the trends that I've seen that I just did not see when I was younger.
Hmm.
And out of respect for your time, I probably won't go into other trends that I didn't see, but there are plenty of trends just across athletes in general that you do see. And that's
Sure.
what
Yeah.
makes this job something that I do enjoy doing because there's so many things that I dealt with, regardless. It's totally agnostic to what level of athlete you are. And
Yeah.
the higher level that you get, obviously, the more relatable it becomes, but it's all the same for everyone. It's just the levels changing.
Yeah. I think
So
that's well
seeing
said.
those trends throughout my career has really been something that's helpful for me to give advice and weigh in on this experience that was shared. Um, as for what it gives me, I mean, I think a huge part of this sport is individual, right? And there's a lot of fulfillment that I get from going and pushing myself to be great, to be the best version of myself, winning bouts that are challenging for me, accomplishing goals. The ego is still very much alive. That being said, I want to say maybe it's always been in me, but specifically towards the end of college, I realized that I really, 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 really enjoy helping other people navigate these same situations and do a better job than I did
Hmm.
and be a better version of themselves than I was of myself at that point in time. And, you see multiple paths for each person. And the more you can push them towards their better path while keeping them engaged and loving the sport is so fulfilling. It's so gratifying. And I got to really engage with that at the university level when I coached for the Air Force Academy and for Duke, and watching these young athletes push themselves and be the best version of themselves and grow was some of the most fulfilling of my memories within the sport. And although I stepped away from collegiate coaching to pursue individual results and other life endeavors, I wanted to stay engaged with it from an official perspective where I'm actually, in a space where people are working with me to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that KM fencing is a great platform for that because Lee and Garrick are in a very similar boat. And we have very different levels of experience. It's not even going to pretend they're amazing athletes and students and all the above. That being said, we share a passion and also many years of experience of just fencing at a high level where we can impact younger fencers in a positive way, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's a review, whether it's mental preparation and training, whether it's understanding what drills or situations you can put yourself in to improve. I find that that's what scratches that itch of helping impact younger fencers' journey and pushing them to be a better version of themselves. Because many clubs are either overloaded, where the coach has a lot of investment and they care about their fencers and they're pushing them to get better on the strip, but they don't have the time or the energy, or in some cases, the expertise to handle that mental, emotional side of being an athlete as much as the mentors for KM fencing do, because those coaches are running a business, they're giving lessons all day, they're running classes, and it's just they don't have the corporate term is bandwidth for this kind of
Right.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
other cases, the coach maybe isn't skilled enough or doesn't have enough experience to help that athlete get to that next level because the coach doesn't have the confidence or they've never done it before. And we do as the KM
Mm-hmm.
fencing mentors. We have, because again, we're not coaches in this conventional sense. We're mentors. We're simply these older athletes who have been down that path regardless of level. We know what it takes to overcome these hurdles. We've pushed
Right.
ourselves to be the best before. We've helped other people push themselves to be the best versions of themselves before. And we we kind of can help bridge that gap for athletes to be intentional with their time and bridge what it is that their coaches are giving them and what they're able to do themselves to the point where they can meet those standards and expectations set by coaches.
Yeah.
I
I
love
love
it.
that.
It's so fun.
Yeah, I can tell you enjoy it, and it's maybe it's a little bit oversimplifying to say like you're able to help people learn from some of the mistakes that you made, because you've obviously had a lot of success, but you made some, had some road bumps along the way. Um, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to get into the lightning round, which is these 5 quick questions that I like to ask, and I've got some fun ones for you. So we talked about the Direct Elimination podcast, and I got to ask, do you have a dream podcast guest, someone, and it can be anybody, in fencing or not, someone you would love to have on the podcast and just like, and I hate this term, but I'm going to use it anyway, pick their brain for some time to hear what they would say. Like, who would be your dream guest?
Yeah, funny enough. So luckily, we've been able to hit already a lot of our dream guests in the fencing world, and
Nice.
we have many dream guests in the fencing world, and we're gonna get them all. We're like Pokemon, or
Catch them all.
for Derek Meinhardt. We're talking to Keith Smart soon. We're getting
Nice.
a lot of legends out there. So I'm actually going to give a non-conventional answer. So for the fencing world, every star ever. That's it's a blanket answer, but it's the truth. And we
Yeah.
want to speak to you guys. If you consider yourself a fencing legend, hit us up. If we haven't talked to you yet, it's because we're trying to get everyone in the New York City area. And if you're in New York and I don't know about you, I apologize. Please reach out to Stephen or me at Direct Elimination on Instagram. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah.
Back
We'll,
to,
we'll put it in the show notes as well, Ari.
yeah,
So we will make sure people can find you.
yeah, we're on Instagram. You can reach out to our personal accounts. But my real answer to this is a non-fencer, actually, someone who has inspired me as well as many other people in their own pursuits. It's a swimmer. His name is Nick Fink. He also represents the New York Athletic Club, as I do in New York, but he does not live in New York. He is an Olympic medalist and a world champion in swimming. He won his first Olympic medal at the age of 31 after becoming a father, working a full time job, and training, all to make his dreams come true. And that is the poster boy for what it is that I'm doing and what it is some of my peers are doing. My co host, Stephen Ewer, is doing. And he's so humble and truly a great athlete. And I think that that is our dream guest. And we've reached
Great
out to him.
answer.
He's not currently in the New York area, but having him on, he was the first person that I thought of that was a non-fencer that I wanted to speak to. And once we have him, that dream will be
I
fulfilled.
love that. Yeah. And shout out to your co-host too. I keep calling it your podcast. It's obviously you and
Yeah.
Stephen do a great job on it.
He's
Okay.
probably a better host than I am. He has the patience to listen to people speak. I just keep talking. Stephen's been a great co-host.
You need that balance, right? I think. Okay. Where's the best tournament city you've ever competed in? You've got to travel the world for fencing. Do you have
Yeah.
a favorite?
Two answers. Tashkent, Uzbekistan was the most unique by a long shot. I don't know if I'll ever go again. I hope I do. It was really cool. 2015 Junior World Championships. I loved it for all the reasons that anyone would love going to a place that totally culture shocks them.
Yeah.
And the place that I love going to off our continent the most is Budapest, Hungary.
Nice. I love that. I've heard good things. Okay, you talked about fishing. If there was another like hobby that you would devote a fencing amount of time to, and it can be fishing if you want, but let's say you stop fencing and you're going to put that same amount of time into another hobby or passion, what would it be?
Making music.
Oh, really? Okay.
Fishing is a newfound hobby and will eventually probably take over that answer. I love it so much because you get to spend time outdoors and all this stuff, but totally
Nice.
non-athletic related, just not just music, just making art in general. I'm getting a lot more into that and I really enjoy it. So just
I
making
love it.
digital media, music, videos, learning how to paint, that type of stuff.
That's great. Okay, do you have, we've talked a lot about like the mental side, but let's get into a little bit with this fourth question about the physical side. Do you have a go-to like warm-up song or a ritual that gets you in the zone before competition? Speaking of music, like what gets you focused?
Yeah, I alternate between hip hop music and a very, very, very long blues playlist that I've
Hmm,
curated. My favorite song last couple of years in competition is actually Muffin Man by Frank Zappa.
interesting.
It is a hilarious song with an awesome guitar solo.
That's great. Okay, last question. You posted a lot of cool videos, including like asking people for their favorite touch, and I just love that series. Um, can you pick one video that you would pin at the top of your account and say this is like my favorite video I've ever made? Um, yeah, I'd
Ooh.
love to hear if you have one that you were like this is good. I'm loving this.
Favorite fencing touch video
Sure,
would,
or any video, but fencing touch is the one I'm most familiar with because I probably watched all of them at this point.
yeah, I appreciate it. So I would say that my favorite one that I've made would probably be, oh gosh, I've made a lot of those videos at this point. I think this is a cop out answer, but the most recent one is always the most fun one where you get to put your time into it and then you move on. Because I try to put the same amount of effort into all of them where I get a kid
Yeah,
or athlete, make sure that they're enjoying the video of themselves that's getting put on the internet.
sure.
Um, I think I enjoyed making Kazuyasu Minobe's the most because he was the only fencer that I've interacted with that for this video where we actually had to have a translator. So Kent Ioki, who was on the senior travel team at the time, we were
Yeah.
at a training camp in Budapest. He came and he and his mother were translating for me and teaching me how to say the Japanese words for Minobe. And he was so patient, and it was really fun to make just from that perspective, because I know I speak different languages in some of them, and in many cases I'm able to interact with athletes in English or speak to them in Russian, which is one of my other languages that I speak, and we're able to find, a common ground. This one, we had to use a translator, and it was very funny. I was just laughing to myself the whole time because I'm using a translator to make an Instagram video about fencing. It's just the most niche, weird thing that
Yeah.
I probably had done up until that point. So
That's
that,
awesome.
that one I would pin, and it did well. He's an Olympic champion, a legend in that Épée world. So just getting him to be a part of that series was awesome for me.
Yeah. There's going to be some engagement there. Well, all right. This has been a lot of fun. And, thanks for sharing your story and your insights and all the different hats that you wear within fencing: athlete, coach, mentor, storyteller, creator. So if you want to follow along with Ari's journey, be sure to follow him on Instagram at Ari Simmons. We talked about the Direct Elimination Podcast, which you can find on your favorite platforms. And yeah, we'll be cheering you on as you continue your senior team pursuits. And thank you so much, Ari, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And, whether or not you guys listen to our podcast or check out my channel, I just highly, highly, highly recommend taking care of your mental health and being inspired by what you do and the people around you, finding as good of a role model as you can, and really not being scared to ask questions and show that vulnerability. It's about being tough when you're on the strip. Being tough when you're off the strip doesn't help anyone
Yeah.
unless you don't need the help. But really, it's important to reach out when you do need the help, and resources are significantly more available than people ever realize.
That's well said. Yeah, that's great advice to leave it on. And Ari, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Take care.